Hello everybody, this is Chloe and welcome back to another episode of Debunking DID. So today we have a very requested video for you all about inner worlds. And I think we might end up splitting this video into two different parts because when it comes to inner worlds, there's a lot to cover. So some of you might have seen a video that we did before where we made, or I made, the layout of our inner world on The Sims 4. So if you'd like to have a look at what our inner world looks like, you can always go and pop over and have a look at that, and I'll leave a link up there so that you guys can check that out. Let's start with the very basics. What is an inner world? Inner worlds aren't physical worlds in the same way as the world that we live in is physical. They're places in the mind that have been created by the brain for different alters to interact with each other. So if you're thinking of the brain as being like split up into different sections and then each section is an alter, which isn't a scientifically accurate way to describe it, but it helps to visualize it like that. An inner world is like a place where all those parts of the brain can join back up together and communicate with each other. So it's a place where alters can process trauma, they can communicate with each other, they can have their own lives in there, and it varies massively from system to system. So why are inner worlds necessary? Like I said, inner worlds are places for alters to interact with each other. So if communication isn't very good in the external world, then alters can often meet up in the inner world. There's also often a lot of heavy symbolism and metaphorical objects in inner worlds. So for example, we have a carousel in our inner world. It's very common to have a castle or a mansion or a big house in which everyone or some of the alters will live. Personally, we have a mansion, and it's also very common to have places like dungeons, basements, chambers below surface level or in a different area of the map where a lot of trauma is processed and trauma memories might be formed into something more physical, such as an object. And by exploring your inner world, alters can be found in different parts of the space that the brain has made to keep them. We started off without an inner world. We didn't have an inner world. And then what I remember, okay, I'm going to tell you this from my point of view as the host. So when I was first told that the voices that I hear, which I now know are the voices of my alters, aren't normal, the way I was envisioning it is sort of like just a black space. So it was like, I may have to draw this out for you guys. It's like having, say the consciousness is the sun in the middle of the solar system, right? And I was right there in the consciousness, right in the middle, yeah? Because I was the host. And then in varying rings of orbit around that level of consciousness were different alters. So for example, if you're thinking of this in terms of our solar system, the Milky Way, then let's say if I'm the sun, you know, maybe Kyle was Earth. The further out you get in the rings of orbit of the sun, the more difficult it was for me to reach those alters, and the more difficult it was to communicate with them or know anything about them. We had like Kyle and Sally were very close to the consciousness. They were my protectors. They were the easiest for me to reach and talk to and communicate with, and switching was easier even though it wasn't in our control. And then say way out as Pluto was Omega, who I had no awareness of at that time. So how did we make our inner world? Sometimes systems just have inner worlds, come with them. It generally is whatever the brain makes. I know that some systems can like adjust their inner world or build things or ask for things. And what we did, we just thought really hard about it. I was kind of considering it to be sort of like a room of requirement type thing from Harry Potter, where you think about what you need and ask for, and then next time I was there, instead of it being this dark space where I could just hear voices, and had like fleeting images of what my altars looked like, there was a house, big house, big mansion. So we'd been thinking, we need a place for everybody. We need a place to talk. Somehow through our imagination, even though it wasn't a conscious decision, it was a subconscious decision, that became our inner world. In our inner world, we can't consciously change things like some systems can. For example, I really don't like our inner world. I feel very, very frightened in our inner world, very claustrophobic, very, very uncomfortable. It feels haunted to me. It feels frightening, and I don't like it. So if I could change the mansion, I would. And I know some systems can, but the furthest we've got with doing something like that, for example, we started off and Sally wanted a garden. We'd love to do some gardening. And then a few weeks later, we went exploring a little bit further and there was a garden on the side of the house. So that's her garden. And like, I remember, as I processed trauma, not from childhood, but recent trauma, which happened to happen in a forest. A forest then appeared towards the side of the house, and we found a new altar in there. Actually, now we've found a lot of new altars in there who contain various trauma memories and things like that. So it's however the brain decides to visualize what's happened that has been traumatic or could be helpful in terms of metaphorically allowing someone to kind of see what's going on in a visceral way, because it can be difficult to pick out things that you need to work on and understand what's going on when all you have is, you know, like notes left around and voices in your head. It's much easier to have this physical world that's in your head. So, does the inner world feel real? Yes, the inner world to us feels as real as the physical world. It has weather, we have to eat, we have to use the bathroom, we have to sleep. We all have our own bedrooms, we can touch and feel everything. Everything has textures, you know, it gets cold in the house sometimes. There's smell, different sounds. You can hear there's a river that runs outside our mansion. You can hear that sometimes. You can hear birds. Sometimes for me as the host, it can feel a little bit fuzzy, almost like I'm dissociating as I would on the outside world or dreaming, but I know I'm not dreaming. That doesn't seem to happen for anyone else in our system, but it is very normal for the hosts of systems to have limited access to their inner world or to not be able to access their inner world at all. So for example, when our altars switch out, everyone else, when they're not fronting and in control of the body, they go back to the inner world. Not by choice, that's just where they end up. Me, it's more common for me to just black out, so everything just is black, just like I'm asleep or have been knocked out, and then I kind of come back to like sort of like waking up, and it does feel a little bit like waking up after passing out. It's all very confusing. You get a big headache and everything's sort of a bit blurry and you feel a bit sick, and you've got this feeling of movement inside you, which makes me feel a bit travel sick. It's very rare that I'm actually in the inner world, but when I am, I don't really enjoy that. So maybe that's part of the reason why I'm the host, or maybe I just don't have what it takes to deal with some of the things that are in there yet. In the inner world, most altars, if not all altars that I know of in systems who have an inner world, can manifest as themselves and interact with each other. So you see them as they really are. So for example, obviously we don't all look like this body looks like. We all have, you know, different genders, different appearances, heights, weights, body build, you know, tattoos, piercings. It's good to be able to like sit down and have a chat sometimes. Inner worlds vary massively in their complexity. So for example, if you have a small system, maybe like 5 altars or something like that, you might just have a house or even just a room. But I know of systems who have hundreds and hundreds of altars, and you don't need to have hundreds and hundreds of altars in order to have a big inner world. But this system that I do know has a whole, like a galaxy as their inner world, and there are like different planets with their own like properties and things like that, and there are different subsystems of their altars. on each planet, so it's huge, like massive world. So it can range from literally being a room to being a whole galaxy. It's whatever the mind of that person or the mind of that child or adult or whatever sees as the easiest way to visualize the compartmentalization of their brain and the trauma that they need to process. Inner worlds are really well known and accepted in clinical and academic environments. It's accepted that this is something that comes with DID. It's not an overactive imagination and it's not maladaptive daydreaming. It is something that is a part of DID. There's actually a book called The Haunted Self, and that's written by Onno van der Hart, Elliot R.S. Nijhuis, and Kathy Steele, and that includes information about how alters can interact internally and sometimes never take control of the body. So yeah, not all alters in the inner world will be alters that actively front. There are also in some systems, their inner worlds have NPCs, which stands for, in the gaming world, non-playable characters. So they're not alters, but they exist in their inner world. So for example, alters might have, jobs, and they'll have co-workers, and those co-workers aren't alters, they're not part of the system, they don't front, but they exist in the inner world as part of the lives of the alters. So alters in their inner world can have jobs, they can marry each other, they can fall in love, alters can fall in love with each other, adopt each other, have children together, anything that could happen in the real world. And again, some more interesting things that wouldn't happen in the real world. Also, if alters have skills in the inner world that haven't been learnt by the body, then they won't be able to retain those skills when they're fronting. So for example, any skill that's been learnt by an alter fronting will be retained by that one alter. That doesn't mean that any other alter will then suddenly have that skill. It's retained by that alter who learnt it, because none of the other alters would have learned how to do it, right? Some alters who are, for example, non-human alters like fairies or dragons or anything like that. And if you want to know about non-human alters, we have a video on that, which you can find up here. In their inner world, obviously, they can fly or breathe fire or whatever is necessary. And yeah. Some more books that you might be interested in. Internal landscapes, so inner worlds, are also referred to within Dissociation and the Dissociative Disorders, DSM-V and Beyond, which is written by Paul F. Dell and John A. O'Neill. I'll leave these links below and the information will all be in the description box as always. So yes, that's our information on inner worlds for you. If you have any questions, then please do let us know. We are going to do a video on how alters interact in the inner world and how they can form relationships with one another and things like that. So stay tuned for that one. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to leave them below. If I haven't answered you, it's because either I haven't seen your comment, because we're getting a lot now. Thank you so much for 50,000 subscribers. I can't believe it. I don't understand at all, but I'm so thankful. So if I don't get around to your comment, I'm really sorry. And if another reason why I may not answer your comment is because it's already been answered in a video. So if you do have a question, feel free to ask anyone else in our little family of subscribers, and hopefully they can point you in the right direction if we don't get around to you first. So thank you so much for checking us out, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and stay tuned for the next one. Lots of love, everybody. Bye.